Coach Vance here, Senior International Coach, USA Weightlifting and Sport and Exercise Science Professor. Today, for Supplement Sunday, I'm going to go over Yohimbine HCL. You can see it's very potent. It even has a warning label right there. Very potent, not a sample. So, this is known as a alpha receptor antagonist. So we're going to learn what that actually means, and the reason why I get the raw powder when I do use this supplement is because there is even research that shows that the majority of your Yohimbine supplements do not contain the actual amount on the bottle. So the research on Yohimbine is very mixed. Some shows that it works, some show that it doesn't work at all. Some of those discrepancies could be that, well, maybe it doesn't work. Maybe it doesn't work with every type of population. Maybe it's diet and nutrition dependent, or maybe people just don't take it correctly, which is often the case as well. So we're going to look at that. Yohimbine is not only an ingredient in fat-burning supplements, but it's also often put into pre-workout supplements as well, which I think is very misplaced. And we will look at why it's probably not a good idea to include it in your pre-workout supplements. So using fatty acids for fuel relies heavily on your beta receptors, amongst other things. So your beta receptors are stimulated through exercise or from being in calorie deficits. Your body basically produces catecholamines like epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, norepinephrine, and you can see the beta receptors are stimulating your heart rate, increase in heart rate, and also you have the beta-3 receptors on the fat cells themselves that are releasing fatty acids into the bloodstream to be used as fuel. These can be stimulated even further through chemical means using any type of stimulant such as caffeine, asthma medications such as ephedrine, clenbuterol, and albuterol, amongst others. Also, of course, amphetamines and harsh chemicals like that. So beta reception is a sympathetic response, and alpha reception is a parasympathetic response. The alpha receptors are on your smooth muscle and are active during rest, essentially to allow digestion and storing energy instead of releasing energy. So they have a very important job as well. So the hypothetical reason why you would take Yohimbine is essentially Yohimbine is an alpha receptor blocker. So it prevents that parasympathetic response coming online, and it'll prolong your sympathetic response. So for example, if you're on a diet, it could prevent lipogenesis, so the increase in body fat. It could prolong the lipolysis, the release of fatty acids to be used as fuel, and theoretically it could be synergistic with any kind of stimulants you're using. So if you take, for example, a certain amount of caffeine or some other stimulants and you add Yohimbine to it, then the life of that sympathetic response will be greater. So theoretically, maybe you would burn up more energy and more fatty acids as well to make you leaner. So this is often a quoted study with soccer players where they showed a significant decrease in body fat levels and improvement in body composition, no improvement in performance, bench press, leg press, that sort of thing. There was some limitations in the study, such as they didn't control for diet, and they used caliper readings versus a more gold standard body fat composition testing, so we don't know for sure if those limitations played into the actual results themselves. This study does show that yohimbine does what is marketed. During exercise, it increases the use of fatty acids for fuel and suppresses glycogen, which could theoretically increase fat loss if used correctly. But this French study used yohimbine plus a very aggressive diet, 1,000 calories, in obese individuals and found no difference in body composition versus the placebo group. So why the discrepancy in results? For one, it has to be used correctly. And the only way you can use yohimbine correctly is in a fasted state. So that would maybe be first thing in the morning. You take your yohimbine, you take your other stimulants if you're using those, and then you start exercising. The reason is because if it's an alpha receptor blocker, you have to essentially prevent those alpha receptors from coming online through another means, which is insulin. So if you're eating, that is going to increase your insulin levels, and yohimbine or not, insulin is probably way more powerful, and it's going to overcome any suppression of the alpha receptors that you get. Second, it has a very short half-life, like 60 minutes. So it has a very fast clearance time. So the extra fat that you're burning is still going to be fairly minimal. So if you think about, I take this supplement, I get on my exercise bike, I go for 60 minutes through its entire half-life, and what? You burn an extra 50 calories worth of fat versus if you didn't take the supplement, maybe you would burn 50 calories more of carbohydrates. So you're talking about a very minimal effect if you're just using it for exercise. If you're taking it several more times throughout the day, you're going to have to be in this kind of fasted state. And so one of the limitations is, when are you going to eat? When are you going to recover from your training? When are you going to diet and all this kind of stuff? Another discrepancy is they often use these drugs with obese people who tend to sit around and not do anything. So you can obviously increase lipolysis, you can increase the number of fatty acids that are entering the bloodstream, but unless you move, you're not actually going to burn them up. The mitochondria do not receive those fatty acids. You get what's called esterification. They move back into your fat cells, and we see this why high doses of caffeine don't really, they might increase metabolism for a very short period of time, but you don't see any difference in body composition, because if somebody is a sedentary individual and they're just sitting around, they're not going to use up that energy anyway, so you don't see much difference in their body composition in those studies either. Another limitation of it is you're going to eventually get some accommodation, and it is believed that that happens in about 2 weeks. So basically, some of the effects of the supplement are going to wear off fairly quickly. So if you are going to use it, that's another reason why these long studies don't seem to pan out, is because if your body gets used to it and it no longer has the same effect, then it won't have very long-term results. So you would probably have to cycle it. You'd probably have to do 2 weeks of yohimbine followed by 2 weeks off or something like that, and then restart the process. One of the side effects of yohimbine supplementation is a significant increase in anxiety. So if you're a highly anxious person, it might not be the best supplement for you. That could be good or bad depending on how you look at it. So an increase in anxiety tends to increase movement as well. So even after your exercise, I've felt it. You get very antsy, you get very jittery, so it increases your movement. You also can experience some nauseous feeling, and it does suppress appetite. So in fact, some of these studies that show promising results, we don't know if it's the yohimbine itself, the stimulatory effect, or it's the fact that you eat less just because, well, if you're nauseous, you don't eat, and if you're very anxious, maybe that you don't eat as well, or maybe you just increase your NEAT, basically your non-exercise movement, and you burn up more calories that way, so that could be a positive benefit. But of course, the negative benefit is then your anxiety is too high, and maybe if you're an anxious eater or something like that, you eat even more. So here's why I don't think you should take it before any skill or strength work, and shouldn't be in your pre-workouts, is probably because it's a good idea that you aren't fasted, because that will affect your performance, of course, and you have to take Yohimbine fasted to get the lipolytic effect. It will still have the anxiety effect. And this comes from my motor learning education. This is the Yerkes Dobson law that shows there is a bell curve between arousal, aka anxiety, and performance. Too high of anxiety is going to put you on the other side of the bell curve, and it's going to negatively affect your performance. I've witnessed this firsthand with my athletes. Their pre-workout messed up their practices, and when I took a look at the ingredients, I see Yohimbine along with all the other things that are increase their anxiety too high, and it's going to essentially ruin their workouts. Also, the nauseating effect that you get could play a role in that as well.
So if you are going to use Yohimbine, my suggestion is, first of all, get a reputable brand that has third-party testing, get the dosage correctly, which is 2 milligrams per kilogram, and use it when you are only significantly lean and you've kind of hit a sticking point, whether that is for cutting weight for an event, cutting for aesthetic reasons. It's probably only effective for 2 weeks at a time, so it has to be cycled, and it should be used before cardiovascular exercise or low intensity movement, because it doesn't seem to have an effect on energy expenditure at rest.